What was the origination of the ritual dually practiced in both Unitarian Universalist and United Church of Christ congregations called joys and sorrows? Or is that joys and concerns, or joys, sorrows, and concerns? And what about milestones? We can't forget I can't do this again. I'm just calling it joys and sorrows. And this is 3 minutes in UCC, Congregationalist history and all that. We appreciate it each time you watch one of our videos. But before we get started, please help us out by subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and pressing that alert button. During the last episode about joys and sorrows, we talked about how the ritual typically works in UU and UCC churches. But where did this ritual originate? In doing research, the honest answer is we haven't found an absolute answer. Anecdotally, there exist stories within particular regions that it got its start in this church or that church, and it was in 1972 or 1976 or whenever. But our goal is not to try to differentiate between all of these stories, each of which is probably both true and untrue in the congregations in which they are told. And instead, we're going to dig into the theological history of this practice. Going all the way back to the Cambridge platform, which we've mentioned in one or two other videos that are linked in the description below, we find that the early congregational churches required prospective members to testify to join the church. This testimony was admittedly different from what most joys, sorrows, concerns, or milestones are today. It admonished the church officers to make trial of fitness of such who enter in the process of trying to join the church. Of course, joys and sorrows does no such thing, but it's important to understand that public witness or testimony was part of the Congregationalist tradition since the beginning of the church's history. In the Robert Rees article from 1968 about public testimony in New England churches, he writes of four primary aspects of testimony or witness. First, they had to display a repentant heart by confessing their sins, at least those of a public nature, to the congregation. Second, they had to recount to the congregation the time and circumstances of their spiritual regeneration to satisfy the church officers that they were truly one of the elect. This was called a public relation, public profession, or public confession. Third, they had to demonstrate their knowledge of the basic tenets of the gospel by making a confession of faith. And last, they had to publicly enter into the church covenant. Surprisingly, this is still a thing today in many UU and UCC churches. We here at 3 Minutes in Congregationalist history don't proclaim a direct link between these four steps to membership in 17th century Congregationalist churches and today's modern joys and sorrows. Instead, we link the concept of public witness to this practice. The concept of public witness didn't stop in the early 1700s when membership stopped requiring testimony. What it appears to have changed into as the British colonies became the United States of America was a public witness to the evils of slavery, to women's rights, and to what had become the modern labor movement. We still haven't been able to find a history of modern joys and sorrows as a ritual, but the sharing of joys, sorrows, concerns, and milestones falls neatly into the concept of public testimony within a church setting. Well, the version in UU churches and in many UCC churches has nothing overtly to do with the original public testimony to membership of our Congregationalist ancestors. The tradition of testifying in church has held strong throughout the last 400 years. And that is today's second part of our three-part series on joys and sorrows in UU and UCC churches. Thanks for watching. If you find our topics interesting, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit that alert button.